Morning, I'm Nabila Khalida and you're watching AWANI. Malaysia's Belanjawan 2026 table under the Economy Madani framework marks a critical turning point in the country's fiscal and financial strategy. With a projected GDP growth of 4.0% to 4.5%, the budget emphasizes domestic demand, structural reforms and inclusive financial resilience amid global uncertainties. One standout indicator comes from the Global Financial Inclusion Index 2025, jointly published by Principal Financial Group and Centre for Economics and Business Research, where Malaysia was one of the only two countries globally to record improvements across all three pillars: employee support, government support and financial system support. And key reforms such as the progressive wage pilot, EPF account 3 restructure and the rise of earned wage access schemes have contributed to Malaysia's rise in global rankings and now placed 7th for employer support and 21st overall. So joining us on site now is Munirah Khairuddin, the CEO and Head of Principal Asset Management Southeast Asia, to unpack how Belanjawan 2026 is shaping investor sentiment, household resilience and the future of financial inclusion in Malaysia. Good morning, Munirah. How are you?
I'm good, thank you.
Thank you for joining me this morning in the studio. Perhaps we could start with the big picture. Maybe let's start with the index that shows the global inclusion progress, which is dipping slightly this year. So in your opinion, what do you see as the main reason behind that slowdown? Is it cost of living and also the policy fatigue, or something that's deeper in the global economy? What do you think about that?
So Principal conducted this market research of our GFII across 42 markets, 42 countries. And yes, we did see some decline in the index. We will attribute it perhaps to a more uncertain environment at the start of the year. But right now we're seeing, I think, someone like Malaysia has done quite well. You mentioned the points of our progressive wage strategy, our EPF Pillar 3. So I think Malaysia jumped the highest, and now we're at number 7 out of all the markets for employer support in the index. So I think broad-based globally, this year has been a period of uncertainty. I would contribute that to why overall decline globally. But there are some shiny spots like Malaysia, and we've done quite well at the 7th position.
Like I mentioned, we see that the global trend is cooling, but Malaysia is moving in the opposite direction. So let's move on to Malaysia. In the context of Malaysia, Malaysia is one of the only two markets that's improvised or improved across all three pillars, like I mentioned earlier: employer, government, and so financial support system. So what's been the key driver for this success, Munirah?
I think, global financial inclusion, right, it's a myriad of many contributing factors. I would attribute our resilience to overall, economic policy, stable markets, strong support from the private sector. So it's not one factor that gets us there, but a combination of stability in policy, stability in markets that gives confidence and rise to employer as well as employee alike in the private market, in private sector.
And we've seen some of those policy shifts play out, quite recently as well, particularly around wages and also retirement savings. So let's touch on the progressive wage pilot and also EPF account 3 restructure that's come into play. The report highlights these as contributors. So can you give us concrete examples how these are translating into real life everyday benefits for Malaysian households and especially for lower and also middle income?
So if you study developed markets, right, pension system has contributed to a lot of stability in capital markets, because these are additional pooled savings, and as the middle income rises, the contribution to capital markets gets more deeper. As I mentioned, right, there is no one factor. It's the continuous stability in our policy that has a multiplier effect on capital markets and in turn into the private markets or the private sector. There is no one factor. It is about long-term stability, long-term consistency in policies, stability in governments. So all those, I think, we're on the right track actually for even further advancement in financial inclusion and financial markets.
So we just seen perhaps 3 frameworks have been, been focused for the ASEAN that just wrapped up yesterday. So what do you think? How can this actually, all the agreements and also discussions in this context can actually help moving forward?
Yes, I was participating in some of the ASEAN conferences over the last weekend. Malaysia plays a pivotal role, actually. While we are a relatively smaller country by demography, but I think our know-how and our, cultural savviness in bringing together leaders across the region is something to be, applauded for. So playing alone in a 700 million economic bloc of people, it's not going to work, right? So I think Malaysia has shown the leadership to be part of the 700 million people. And with that, we can have a stronger say. And indeed, you could see all the leaders were in town. We play a much, much stronger positioning in the global markets rather than, alone in this journey.
But however, all these policies, we can make all these policies, all these frameworks can help. But the real challenge is demographics, right? And that's another big challenge. So we've come to the regions, the aging population is growing, has become a growing concern, which puts pressure on retirement savings and also healthcare and also social security. So in your opinion, how well prepared is Malaysia to address the financial implications of an aging society as a whole? And of course, particularly in retirement readiness and long-term care, are we doing enough or there's so much more to explore?
Yeah, so our income replacement ratio, so basically the IMF and World Bank recommends about 70% in income replacement ratio, meaning if you retire and you earn 10,000 ringgit, you need to actually have 70% ready for the rest of your, your life, your mortality rate. Malaysia today, if I'm not mistaken, is about 35%. So we are halfway there. And therefore, it's critical that, we do a couple of things, that we embrace the new economy of digital and technology and healthcare. And then secondly is deepening that retirement pool. So if we compare ourselves to across the region, we are actually not bad. EPF has done a fantastic job. It's just that income gap is still there. And then a lot of the B40 are still not equipped, financially. So therefore, when you're not equipped financially, it's quite hard to also prepare for retirement.
So besides aging society, we've also seen new digital tools reshaping how Malaysians manage money today. So you've been a strong advocate for digital micro-investing through platforms like Go Plus Invest. So how has that platform changed the way Malaysians approaching saving and also investing at the same time? And is financial inclusion now extending beyond basic access into richer participation? And are we seeing real behavioral shifts yet for now?
Yeah, through our data, we've launched this. We've launched this financial democratization investments on our platform for about 3 years now. And you could see that, we went through a journey of coming up with simple solution and then at the same time educating, especially the young ones, right? I'm quite happy to say, actually, when we looked into our data, actually a majority are actually 40 years and below, with quite acute, higher balances. People between maybe 25 to 35. So it shows that there's a high embrace on, digital platforms, to encourage savings and financial, and participation in financial markets. But it takes quite concerted effort to educate, and you could see that improvement is coming up. So we need to know how to speak. So when you dissect that B40, half are maybe hardcore poor, but the other half are actually the younger generation. It's how you engage with this younger generation. And I'm actually quite enthused because I could see them picking up. And the way forward is absolutely digital.
But digital trust is one of the concerns as well. So how can we actually mitigate to that crisis?
Yeah, so digital trust takes a whole, ecosystem framework, right? We are licensed by a Securities Commission, and so, we there's a step-by-step guidelines how to make sure that, we build this trust. So it's really important to invest in Securities Commission approved trust with rising of scams, etc. Our platform is very stable within the Touch and Go digital. So I think we've built a lot of trust. We've acquired over 1 million customers on the platform. And the thing with investing is that you've got to do it continuously and with discipline, because the multiplier effect in investing in financial markets will really grant you long-term returns, especially for the younger ones. So the younger ones, I find are either they're very conservative or they really go all out on the high risk. What about somewhere in between, right? So steady, stable, consistent, repeatable returns is what I think everyone should be looking for.
But after all, this positive trajectory sustaining is a real concern now. So what will be the biggest risk Malaysia faces in keeping this positive trajectory? And you've mentioned economic uncertainty earlier, and also financial literacy gaps and demographic pressures. So which of these are the most pressing ones, and how should we prioritize in tackling all this at the same time?
Maybe I'll tackle it from the financial markets perspective today. I think markets have rallied quite well. We are expecting Q4 and Q1 to be quite strong in equities, against a few backdrop. So for Malaysians, right, with Fed is going to cut more interest rates, so there will be some dollar weakness. But with that dollar weakness, countries like Malaysia, stability in ringgit, emerging markets should rally. Especially in equities, and we see that China market seems to show China market has rallied like 30% year to date, whether A shares or H shares, and so there's a lot of renewed optimism in China, and Malaysia is part of that big dependency on how China does. U.S. President will be meeting President Xi Jinping, and markets are very anticipative and excited about that, because I think it's the first step to improving, stock market in the region. So, as an investor, it's really important to remain invested and not time the market. And so therefore rely on fund managers who are, long-standing in this. You need to continuously remain invested, because it's very hard to time the market. And so in longer periods of time, right, your average return will be stable. Right? Don't try to time the market too much. In fact, it's a general investment 101. Buy on dips, buy on market weakness, add on to your investments in market weakness. And then now, if you had done that, right, this year when people are, uncertain, look at the markets today, have absolutely rallied.
Munira, we have about 2 minutes left. So to wrap up this conversation, perhaps in your opinion, what's the outlook for financial inclusion for the next year, 2026? And we know that private sector engagement matters a lot. So how can actually Malaysia further engage between employers, fintechs, and also private sectors in supporting inclusion efforts as a whole? Yeah,
so I think Malaysia has already climbed that up. We just need to continue to double down on that. Sessions like this, right, hopefully will spur on more interest and, investor education. We need to just continue doing this, but I do urge that I think we got to go more digital, so that that message goes wider, and employers continue to do a good job together with the government.
All right, that was Munira Khairuddin, the CEO, also head of Principal Asset Management Southeast Asia. And as we've heard, while Malaysia is making headway in financial inclusion, continued focus on education and digital adoption, employer and government plays a key role when it comes to making this possible. So thank you so much again, Munira. And we can conclude this whole conversation on all of our social media platforms, and that includes Astro, AWANI.com,